PowerPoint because it saves you having to look at me, which is nice. Sorry.
You should be able to share the screen, Myriam. Yeah.
I would imagine I'm going to try, you know, these things. I'm always surprised when it works.
Yes.
Does this work?
Yeah, that's working.
Unbelievable. It's easier. I know we don't have long. I understand that. So what I'm going to do is just to do my best to try and explain some of the work, how I've been working with 5G, with sensitive patients. And good or not good, I'm one of them. So it's great for my patients, not so much fun for me, particularly in London. The way I work, I'll tell you a bit about my background. Sorry, before that, I came across this lady. Please Google her. She's done the most incredible video. Her name is Claire Edwards, as you can see. I'm going to put the handouts of all of this for you, so you don't have to write everything down. And she was saying how 5G is implicated in COVID-19 through the correlation of the rollout and the mandatory flu vaccination, starting with Wuhan and Milan, and how the vaccine affects the immune system, and therefore you get increased susceptibility to electromagnetic radiation. I put it as EMR, sometimes I put it as which is the whole point. It's about susceptibility. It's why are some people sensitive and other people, lucky for them, seem to not react at all. So what Claire said, which was interesting, is she said the symptoms of COVID are identical to electromagnetic radiation. And the doctors, as we know, are not equipped to recognize the difference. And it's interesting because you were talking about doing letters to try and prevent masks from going up. And with all my neighbors, this is collaborative, we did a collective response to a Barnet council who were trying to put a mast up in our area. And I did the research on how to approach writing the letter and just basically quoted everything from the WHO, who say wireless technology heats up the cells. And then I used that with COVID to say it's not a good idea to put a mask. Anyway, separate thing. So this is what Claire Edwards says. The way I treat patients is a little bit odd. I've been a practitioner. I started this journey in 1984. Yes, I was 5 at the time. And I'm very lucky because I have a very peculiar father. I had a very peculiar father. He was a GP and he quit the NHS in the 80s for complementary medicine, and he became obsessed, and I'm using the word obsessed because it's exactly correct, into bioresonance machines. And he was always in Germany, and they were always talking, all these machines, they base everything on Schumann waves, on resonance, frequencies, geopathic stress. We had to learn German in the end because we were there that often. So my style, like my dad, it's medical, and from that I went to acupuncture, and my main field is homeopathy with herbs and these machines. And in order to treat people with hypersensitivity, as you can imagine, it's not easy because it's so vague. The symptoms are vague and the symptoms vary. So I find that the people who come, I mean, I also specialize in autoimmune diseases and cancer. And like these sort of diseases, the people who come to me for hypersensitivity are usually people who've been suffering for a long time. We call this like chronic cases. And when we're treating chronic cases, unfortunately, there isn't a one size fits all or a magic bullet that everybody wants. Bad analogy, okay? It's looking at a patient from all kinds of different angles. And in order for a cure, You know, most of the time, people are just trying to manage the symptoms. And this is what happens with most therapies and most treatments. You're aiming at producing and providing relief. Okay. And what I'm aiming for, I'm very ambitious with my patients, and I'm aiming for them to be the best version of themselves and to be even stronger than before as a result of quite a comprehensive treatment protocol. So I use a variety of disciplines, and when you have a person with a chronic disease, doesn't matter what it is, it could be asthma or rheumatology or a skin problem or a gastric problem. In conventional medicine, these patients are referred to the relevant specialists. And you end up, particularly with EMF sufferers, with people going on a merry-go-round of all the different specialists in various fields and just going around and chasing their tails. And at best, they achieve some relief, and at worst, they're given more and more medication and therefore become weaker and weaker and weaker. So a holistic view is one of the best ways to manage any chronic disease, and you need to be invested in helping yourself to recover. Okay, this is the thing. So when we're looking at electromagnetic sensitivity, so these are some of the symptoms. These are not all of the symptoms. These are some of them. And it ranges from fatigue, malaise. Malaise means you just don't feel right. You're not ill, but you're not well. Feeling hot in the face. A lot of patients haven't put here mentioned tingling, shooting pains, nerve pains, tinnitus, that comes up a lot, dizziness, all sorts of things. Sleep disorders is also consistent with so many of these people. And it all varies from individual to individual. Very vague, because these symptoms cover so many different systems of medicine, or different, how can I put it, different specialties of medicine. So what I see when I see people with these sort of symptoms across various systems, it's more like a syndrome. It's not something you can put a finger on and say, okay, it's a gastric problem, oh, it's a neurological problem, or it's a musculoskeletal, because it's covering such a broad spectrum of organs. So it's kind of the syndrome. And because of that, partly because of this, I believe, doctors are not understanding how to treat it, right? I don't know what's going on with this, it's frozen. Okay, e.g. neurology, gastric, musculoskeletal, etc. Catherine was asking about my machine. This is the machine that I use. This is actually my dad's. I've got my own. And this would be really good for our group, for this group. I hope I become part of it, to get somebody who's a specialist in this. This is known as ultrafine resonance therapy. This is some of the blurb, I'm not going to go into it, but basically you've probably seen or familiar with something like this, like a Vega device, where we're measuring electromagnetic stress on acupuncture points on the hands and the feet. And from doing that, we get an idea of the energy in the organ. You can see if there's a problem before there's an actual physical problem. So it's a brilliant way of diagnosing, because we're looking at an overview of the body system, but it's also a really handy way of checking remedies. We use a medicine test device. I say we, me and other people who use this, and by putting any remedy or vitamin or anything onto the circuit, you can see by testing the patient again directly the effect on the patient. Really handy. So recently I've just made my pine needle tincture, And I've been testing it on patients. It's really very good, by the way. And I just got white pine needles, steeped it in vodka, and let it sit. I actually put it out on the last full moon, and made a remedy from it. And instead of just giving out to people, I like to see the effects of any substance on the person. So it's really, really useful. And this is a very old model of this device. I'm not personally keen on the newer models. They allow you less flexibility. Whereas the older models, you can kind of do your own thing. So I use this to treat and test organs, which is very interesting for hypersensitives. So what I have noticed is some people, not so many, are born as sensitives. They're very sensitive, often creative, artistic individuals, and that is how they are. And because of their sensitivity, they react easily to things, from food allergies to, pollen to chemicals, and therefore also radiation. But most people become sensitive. They're not born sensitive, they become. I'm one of those. And it's very important to find out why. Why do some people react so strongly and some people appear not to react? It's not that they don't react, but it doesn't seem like there's any problems. There could be a cumulative problem. So in homeopathy, I'm telling you as a homeopath, because this is how I work. The most important thing we do for every patient is we take down the medical history of the person. And one of the most important things, which I didn't put in this slide, is the timeline. So we're kind of going through age by age by age, all the things that happened in this person's life, whether it's emotional, but particularly health related. And with EMF, we're looking for when the person became sensitive, like at what point in their life. And as you're going through the timeline, I was nothing, they went through puberty, everything's fine, in their 20s, everything's fine, 30s, oh, wait a minute, suddenly in the 30s, something happened. So this is why the timeline is really important. And for ourselves, if you're trying to work out how you became sensitive, it's actually very important because it's part of the cure as well. Okay, so an etiology is a cause, like what has caused it. And it could be anything. In many cases, it will be the person had an infection or an immune-related disease, the worst one being glandular fever or recurrent strep throat, etc. In many cases, repeated vaccinations. So some of these very sensitive, creative people also have a penchant for traveling, which is very dangerous. And because they travel all over the world and they're good people and they want to do the right thing, you'll see that many of them tend to get every vaccine that they believe is necessary to go off to that said country. And following this, they get weaker. Some of them are people working in the medical environment or hospital staff. They have to be vaccinated, and it weakens them. And you see the difference of before and after. And it's like, this is when everything started to change. Antibiotics. So many people have had antibiotics. And that was my cause for when I became sensitized. These are all things that open us up. Okay, the tougher ones amongst us, it does nothing. For the more sensitives, it can be like opening Pandora's box in a way. And also not just physically, emotionally. You could have a lot of emotional trauma or emotional abuse or be in a high stress situation, combine that with fatigue, etc. And that is when people become sensitive. These are some of the reasons. So when we're looking at, this is my understanding, and there's probably many different views on this, but I'm just telling you what I've seen is, come back. My computer has a life of its own. So the symptoms as seen are very vague. The WHO website says it cannot put up a mast if there are people who are sensitive, as this would and will affect their health and their rights. However, it's like a chicken and an egg. An average doctor will not be able to spot electro hypersensitivity because it's so vague and they're not trained. Now with 5G, we will hopefully notice a lot of change, hopefully not, but if you know what I mean, and it will become clearer, but actually that as well is not clear, and I'll explain why. Another disease, which is interesting, is called fibromyalgia. I don't know if any of you have heard of fibromyalgia. And it was not recognized as a disease. It did not have a name because it was so vague. And the sufferers tend to have muscle aches and pains, but they also have neurological symptoms. You know, they can't stand lights or loud noises, depending on the person. And they were always looked at as, you know, people who were like malingerers and just trying to get off work, until it was recognized and given an actual label. And it's been put in the field of rheumatology for some reason. My patients who come for electrohypersensitivity, this is what they're diagnosed as, ranging from fibromyalgia. Many of them are told they've got a thyroid problem, or thyroid hypersensitivity, hyperactivity, because a thyroid also is kind of a survival mechanism. So if you are stressed, your adrenals and your thyroid are going to respond and go into hyperfunction mode. But most of these people are designated just being allergic, and they do not realize that radiation could have a part in it. So the best way to try and understand is to look at the person holistically, particularly for someone like me, and also to see enough people and see if there are any patterns amongst the symptoms. Like, are there any commonalities amongst the symptoms? And what I have found with all of these patients so far, okay, and also though, my patients with neurological problems like Parkinson's, MS, etc., is that these people have what's called leaky gut syndrome. And it's damage to the lining of the small intestine. And our gut actually is one long tube. I mean, this is only one part of it. This is not the magic cause for the whole thing, but this is part of it. And the small intestine, as the gut is a long tube, it's the only part of the gut which really interacts with our cells, with the bloodstream. And if there are holes in it, or if it's porous, it's like your boundary between yourself and the outside world becomes blurred, and these people become sensitive. They also don't absorb food properly. They also absorb toxins very easily, and they also leach out very easily. And this is such a common problem, mostly because of antibiotics, certain medication, and vaccines. And part of the gut, it also forms part of the immune system. We have these Peyer's patches, part of the whole immune system. And a lot of people are walking around with this problem. If you think of it like celiac disease, that will help you to understand. Celiac is where you're allergic to gluten. And most of these people actually are allergic to gluten. But the small intestine can grow back. And the way we treat this in homeopathy is we use a probiotic homeopathic remedy, and these are called the Bowel nosodes. And for me, very important, part of a treatment protocol. This is part of really restoring health. You have to look at the gut and what's going on. Are there any questions so far? Because I'm just rabbiting on here. Everyone's gone very quiet, or they've all gone for dinner.
It's really fascinating. Yeah, fascinating, Myriam. We could stop and maybe have some questions at the end. We've got you know, time-wise, what we did is we've got Q&A from April anyway. So you know, we can have some Q&A
at the end. Okay. I'm used to teaching, you see, so it's at this point, especially when students are really quiet, that I get very nervous and like, what the heck? I'll carry on. There's just a little bit more because I don't want to overload. I'm just telling you what I've found, and it helps. That's the point.
I can just add that I'm also sensitive, and this is matching 100% to my case.
Oh gosh, that's good. I'm sorry you're sensitive, but that's good that it's matching.
Yeah.
Can I just say something? I think this is an excellent presentation, Myriam, and I think you're doing a superb job.
Thank you. I haven't finished yet. Say that at the end, and I'll agree. Bless. Thank you. So the point is that you can get this yourself. These are bowel nosodes. Okay. Thank you. And this is really important as part of the whole thing. You remember, as I said before, it's not just my computer sticking. Of course, we're talking about all of this. Is that it's not just one thing. There's more than one factor involved. So sealing the gut is one factor, okay? And the bowel nosode, you'll get this as a handout, okay? It's called GAERTNER, G-A-E-R-T-N-E-R. And for me, this is the 21st century probiotic. Loads of my patients say, oh, no, it's fine, I take probiotics. You have to understand that probiotics are colonies of bacteria and they're not all equal. They're so specific, there's 400 species, I don't want to bore you with all the names, but it's really important to get the right one and the right balance. And this bowel nosode I am currently obsessed with. I have it in every strength and I order it in every potency. And some of this is homeopathic jargon, but this is a brilliant probiotic for that kind of sensitivity, that, you know, poor boundaries between the self and the outside world. So that is one. And now we have the current situation. Okay, so that was electro hypersensitivity, and I've had people coming in with this before 5G. So this is not a recent thing, but it's more now. So now, this is June 2021, I'm having, when COVID was around, during the height of the pandemic, my clinic was fairly quiet. Okay, there was a lockdown. It was also summer. I know people were nervous, but I have patients all over the country, and in many other countries. I have heard of one person personally that I know who's died from COVID. The rest of the people were getting illnesses, getting COVID, recovering from COVID, and I was giving immune booster remedies. This is now a year gone. And now, recently, and I'm attributing this to the vaccine, unfortunately, but that's what I'm just telling you what I'm seeing, is people are now coming in. I can't cope. I was telling Catherine that I was so frazzled that I can't cope with the amount of people who are having the most extraordinary symptoms. Again, weird syndrome of symptoms, ranging from headaches, nausea, fatigue, chilliness, malaise, tingling, the whole thing. A little bit, as Claire Edwards said right at the beginning, that COVID symptoms are similar to 5G, but now we're in a different territory now. We're not only in COVID. I'm talking in terms of being in London. I think this this is pretty much everywhere now, because there's so many factors involved now. So we've got 5G, and masks are going up at the rate of knots. I sent Catherine a document today about the government are trying to release a law whereby prior notification doesn't need to be given to put up masks. Please, we all need to work on this. So, but we have 5G a lot. I have a 5G detector that I have, and in 2020 rather, I would put it in my car and clip it to my mobile phone holder and clamp it and put it on and just go around the high street. Oh my word, these masks, and I've had this detector for about 15 years, so I know the sound. It's an audio type of detector. And there's a difference between the sound for a packet of energy from your Wi-Fi to a mobile phone signal. I can recognize the difference. But the 5G masks, they're like shrieking like banshees. So scary. It would wipe me when I went to the high street. I was telling Catherine this, I would just come back and have to sit down, actually lie down for an hour or so, because I'd just be wiped. So right now, as a practitioner, I've got to try and discern what is going on with my patients, because you've got the individual themselves with their own medical history, their own constitution, etc. We've got 5G, relatively new. We've got COVID. Some have had COVID, and those who've had COVID and thank God recovered from COVID are still not quite recovered from COVID, because they're finding themselves to be more sensitive. So that's a problem. We've got on the emotional level all the stress and fear, okay? Then we've got another, these are like layers, you know, it's like a Victoria sandwich and then some. We've got the COVID vaccine. So now, you know, I tell my patients, please come, don't come after your vaccine, wait at least a week, because they're shedding all over the place. So you get those who are vaccinated, and then those who are not vaccinated, who are reacting to the shedding from the people who are vaccinated. So this is like a nightmare.
Sorry, can I just ask you a quick question? Sorry,
Yeah.
because you're in your flow. When you say COVID,
Yeah.
are you referring to that COVID is actually a disease, or are you referring to the vaccination? Because there's two different aspects.
So much, and I was really hoping that no one would ask me that question.
Yeah, because COVID,
I'm referring to those. No, I hear you. Yeah, so this is why I put them in separate.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, don't worry. Sorry, I'm sorry. So COVID, I'm referring to that as people who've had some sort of, you know, whether you, some sort of respiratory, whatever some of these symptoms were, and who said, we tested positive, did the whole shebang, quarantined, etc., and recovered to a point. So that's what I mean by those who've had it.
Okay, it's just that to use the word COVID or COVID-19, whichever you prefer, is just that, you know, there's been overwhelming evidence that COVID-19 has not been actually isolated.
And I agree.
The COVID-19, I guess, as you know, is coming from the vaccination.
And I agree. So I should put the same thing in inverted commas.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that am I on the right page here?
Yeah, you are 100%, because I agree with you. However, what I have learned, oh my goodness, I can't even get to tell you what it's like in practice. And all these people who you really like, they end up really liking people, some of them. And they come and they tell you they've had the vaccine or this or that, and I have to keep a straight face because what I have learned as a practitioner is I'm there to support the patient and keep my view out of it and do my best, you know, whether and the smart ones came to me right at the beginning of this and said, what can we do? And I would say, work on your immune system. And I always have remedies for the immune system that I give out every year anyway. So they were coming for that, and that's what homeopaths are working on. So this is what I mean by COVID.
Okay.
And this is separately those people who may or may not have had COVID, but have had the vaccines.
Yeah.
And then that's why I said the last lot are people who have not had the vaccines, but are with or in proximity. You just have to go to Waitrose, and are experiencing the shedding. And the problem with the shedding is that the sensitives are sensitive to the people who are vaccinated. You see, so what I'm trying to say very badly is 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 factors, and these are just recent. These are just recent.
Right, can I just quickly ask but what is the shedding? Or what do they, you know, can I get sensitive when I'm with people who are vaccinated? Or
if you are susceptible.
Yeah.
It's a very long word, and if you can spell it, you can have it, because it's a really tricky word. I'm susceptible, and I'm so annoyed with myself. I can't begin to tell you. Some are not sensitive, some are sensitive. As homeopaths, we were having humongous debates on this whole vaccine. Well, it's not really a vaccine, it's actually gene therapy that's going to go in. And yes, there's, as Nicholas Martin did brilliant work on this, you know, there's a nanolipid particle aspect to it, and then there's the protein aspect. What I do know is when they're in my clinic, I feel it very strongly. Some people more than others.
Because I have the feeling I feel it too, like I'm not so sure sometimes if I think it now, because I heard I can feel it, or for example today. No, for example today someone came and he is vaccinated and came to visit me, and after a while we went for a walk at some point, and suddenly I became so tired, and I'm not sure. Then I thought, is that maybe because it was a bit kind of the tiredness. Sometimes when I'm in electromagnetic fields, I also get really tired. But yeah, I wasn't really sure, but I think, and is it really, you know, because of
I now believe it's a thing, and I'm seeing it because of people coming to my clinic.
Yeah.
And it depends on how strong, maybe perspiration, it's in the breath, it's in, you know, but at the same time we have to sort of like coexist with these people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but what is it actually that they emit?
I don't know. Yeah. From the symptoms, I'm guessing from the symptoms, it's some sort, I'm trying to get to that, you know. I'm trying to get to that later on in this.
Sorry, yeah.
It's like, no, I understand, because you want to understand, like, what is it and what to do. And with any luck, no one else has any of these. For me, I'm blessed because I work from home, one room devoted to my clinic, and I made a pledge to wash my clinic in between patients. No one sees me do it, but I do it because I made that pledge and I feel it's correct. Yeah. Because people are scared, you know, which you can imagine and understand. But people who've been vaccinated, particularly week 1, week 2, week 3, it's less after week 3. It gets less after time.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's stronger with the second dose. And hence the suramin content in pine needle tea, I don't feel it's strong enough, but it's definitely part of the solution.
Pine bud tea.
Pine needle tea.
Pine needle tea.
Nice picture of it, which I did not put on this beautiful presentation. But anyway, it's a fungal thing, and it's different to the 5G. This is what I'm just observing. And a disclaimer, this what I'm telling you and what I'm observing is still evolving, because the situation is evolving. And really, for me to make a statement as a practitioner, I need a lot of cases, see, rather than just the 50 or so that I've seen so far. Computer sticking, sorry, come on. So,
would it be good to let you finish Myriam. Are you near the end?
Yeah, very much so.
That's great.
Super near the end, because it's only 20 minutes. Okay, so this is what I found. There's a difference in the symptoms between the EMF patients and the COVID vax or COVID shedding patients. They're completely different systems, if you like, or in 5 elements, we call them different elements. This is a fire element problem, and this is an earth element problem. With the EMF sensitivity and leaky gut and hypersensitivity, we call this a deficiency disorder. People who are open, they become, weakened, some debilitated, malabsorption, etc. And it's more deficiency. And that responds well to, as I mentioned, this bowel nosode, Gertner. With the COVID vaccine and COVID shedding, Nicholas, thank you so much for your work. You're my hero. Everything I've been researching on, you came up and just gave it on a plate. Oh, thank you. So with this is more of a damp fungal sort of problem. And the symptoms are more fungal, like the headaches move around, and we call this damp. It's not stationary, it's not in one place. And you see it from the tongue, and that's how I want to finish, is just to show you a quick way just to look at someone, spend 1 minute and know. It could be due to the bacteria they're using to make these RNA spike proteins, because they're taking this DNA and they're straightening it out and extracting it, etc. The vaccine shedding and the COVID vaccine is a difference to the deficiency. It's an excess. So fungal diseases are viewed as an excess diseases, like an excess mucus, excess, sputum, dampness, rheumatic, etc. And I explain it to people because most people have heard of Candida, and I say it's similar to Candida. So if you think of Candida, you will go on, you can Google that. The quickest way to find out the difference between the two is to look at the this is in Chinese medicine. We're using 5,000 years old medicine to solve a modern day crisis. And I'll put this on your handout. This is apparently a normal tongue, no coating, etc. Okay, my internet connection. And this is a fungal type of a tongue. Okay, please, I hope everyone's had dinner. And you can see it's swollen and it's greasy and it's coated. And the people who are affected by the shedding have literally white tongues or yellow tongues, thick with coating. And that's how you know it's fungal. And there's all sorts of which we will not go into. Okay, and I'm going to put this on your handouts. There's a bowel nosode, and it's very different. And ignore the name; it's not what it sounds. Okay, there's no P. Okay, it's called Psychotico, and it's a probiotic made from the fungal group of bacteria. And this, alongside change in diet, sometimes supplements, the pine needle tea, it's a conglomerate, it's a mixture of many different approaches to treat one thing and make the person less sensitive, more and stronger. So that's the end of this. And now, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Fantastic, Myriam. Thanks so much. What we could do is maybe
that's fine. It's a bit rushed.
You could come off screen share, and then we can speak.
You are screen sharing, stop share.
That's it. Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Myriam.
No, you're welcome. I'm just trying to verbal diarrhea and vomit this all out to try and get as much information out as possible. So I'm sorry.
No, it's really, really good. And it also confirms all my research, naturopathic and homeopathic. You've added in the bowel nosodes, which didn't immediately come to my mind. So I'm really grateful to you.
You're welcome.
We've got other homeopaths on here, which is great. Delny from Stroud, and naturopath Judith from Dorking area. So this is fascinating. Brilliant. And Jose, who was talking, who comes from Portugal, He's the ex-telco engineer, and he actually was in favor of 5G until he himself got lots of symptoms and realized that it wasn't what it was all cracked up to be. So, you know, it's great to have you on our side. Fine. Because
of course I'm on your side, Catherine. I mean, come on.
And everything you said with regards to COVID as well, you know, the points that Rose made, you know, what is COVID? You know,
yeah,
who had
really,
it, hasn't, you know,
really.
these are questions which in this group we ask a lot. And actually, Philippa Winkler, who's coming on to speak later, you might, if you have time, you might like to stay. She's talking about the gain of function testing.
Absolutely, that's what they're, yeah.
And the similarities with the lies and the deception around 5G. So yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. So yeah,
any questions? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean I know the answers, but you know, if you want to ask a question.
I'd like to ask a question. Sorry, just a quick one. What are the remedies that you can, if you've been contaminated, sorry to use that word, by the shedding, what are the remedies that a person can use to extract the contamination? Is that possible? Because
I'm still working on it, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm still working on it. I have immunity remedies, and they're combination remedies. I use a sorry, we're going to talk homeopathic jargon, please forgive us. Okay, avert your eyes for 2 minutes. I use the Narayani remedies a lot. You know, they've got Narayani glands, Narayani immunity, Narayani elimination, which is Staphylococcus strep bacteria.
Narayati, that I'm not familiar with that word.
They're combination. They're combination remedies.
Oh, right.
Carcinosin, excellent. Emerald, excellent.
Okay.
Gem remedy, emerald, brilliant. Also brilliant for 5G, and maybe because of the hexagonal shape, I haven't worked it out yet. What else do I use in there? Thymus gland, really good. And all that group of sort of like antifungal remedies. You know, we've got Thuya, we've got Medorinum, we've got, you know, Calibic, Hydrastis, etc. And then if you want to treat a specific person, you can then individualize to that person rather than generalizing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I was thinking, Myriam, you know that I don't know whether you know the work of Diana Votkoviak, where she says that the kinase pathways can be triggered by microwave radiation. And what I was thinking, I'd be interested to hear what you think. You know, these ladies who come in contact with vaccinated people, and postmenopausal ladies are triggered to have their periods back again. What I was thinking is just an idea. I mean, I'm not saying emphatically that the kinase path, basically you've got these nanoparticles and they act as transmitters and receivers for the radiation. So they're increasing the amount of radiation in the body and then broadcasting it out to the people that they meet. So therefore, they might trigger these kinase pathways in these women. And these pathways are enzyme pathways which might catalyze their hormonal functions in the menstrual cycles. But what I was thinking, I was very interested in what you said about the symptoms of the people who are coming, apart from the ladies who get triggered to have menstrual cycles, what happens to the people that you went through the symptoms? And there are 3 things that I wanted to see what you think. One is what you think of Diana Votkoviak. The other one was the nature of ClO2 and of suramin is to take radiation out of the body. And the curious thing is the government have been using ClO2 to get radiation out of soldiers who have been exposed to radiation. And I've forgotten what the 3rd thing was.
Don't worry. I don't know, Diane. I've heard of that name. I've been watching so many videos. I've lost, I don't know which is which, but you've got a point with because I agree on the nanolipid particles. And that is also potentially in the testing. I should have added that. It's number 6. forgot to put COVID vaccine, COVID shedding, COVID testing that the kids are having to do. And maybe like the vaccine with the test, particularly going up the nose, you know, it forms these chain-like structures, doesn't it? Like polymer structures, crystal-like structures, and goes up to the pineal gland. And that is going to influence all hormonal function. The most noticeable will be periods, and that's what a lot of my female patients are coming in, but not just menopausal or postmenopausal. They're saying they're bleeding, or they're bleeding intermittently, or one lady thought that she'd received the fountain of youth because she hadn't had a period for many years, and she started bleeding. And I was like, well, there you go. But then also the animals. People are telling me, you know, their dogs are having nosebleeds and shedding. So we know that it's so pervasive. This is why, you know, you're right, like what treatment is there, or what one thing? And because this is all these things, so we're looking at all these things, we're looking at 5G in the context of the situation we're all in now, okay? And all of it has become like an amalgam of assault on every level, you know, chemically, radiationally, on every single level. This is why I was referring to, why don't we, okay, look at things that can help for that, but the most important thing is to reinforce ourselves, seal ourselves, you know, make ourselves stronger, because they're just going to bring the next and the next and the next. And I don't want to be living my life in fear. Do you know, it's like playing tennis and you're constantly, right, what next bat, what? Do you see? And also you don't want to go to lower vibrations. You want to keep your vibrations up, because then you really get ill, actually. I don't know about the ClO2 though. Is it chlorine dioxide?
Yes. What is very interesting, the FDA rubbished it a long time ago. Probably, very briefly, it was discovered that it cured malaria, but in fact, if you study the science of it, it is an electron stealer which denatures the pathogens, and then they're excreted in the body. When it's taken into the body, it decomposes into water, oxygen, and what was the other? Salt, you know, sodium chloride. But the nature of it is that it has this oxidative effect on the pathogens, and they're broken down, their bonds are broken down inside the pathogens, and that means they're excreted in the normal process with the byproducts of the decomposition of ClO2. And it kills all these so-called viruses, and it also takes radiation out of the body. So it has this dualistic function. And I've been taking it for 2.5 years, and my wife read the FDA description that if you take it, you'll drop dead, and if you recommend it to anybody else, you'll be considered a murderer. But so far, I'm still alive.
Good to know.
I've had a cold since I took it.
I wonder if it's similar to hydrogen peroxide then.
Well, that's a good question. It's different from hydrogen peroxide because the chemical process that it activates is a different process. But I have heard good reports about hydrogen peroxide too.
I've taken that for Stuart and I took lots of hydrogen peroxide for about a year. And we introduced a lot of friends to it as well. And it only had very beneficial results. I took very few drops. He took masses of drops, but our constitutions are really different. And we both had good effects, and so did other people that we've had acquaintance with. Yeah.
Can I say, go back to your tennis match where you're batting things away from you?
Constantly, it's exhausting.
Well, another part of 5G, of course, are these massive, massive satellite systems that are being picked up. And they're just being configured, and more are being switched on. It's incredibly complex. So you've got you can't have a stationary satellite with these systems. They're too low and too near, and they're constantly going in an arc over us. So that you have ground stations, and the satellite beams need to go on, and then after a while, the next one comes along and connects, and so on. and then the satellites connect with each other and back down to other ground stations and everything. It's just terrifically complex. But what it means, what I've seen recently with electrosensitives, and possibly myself a bit, is that you get good days and bad days, or parts of the night when suddenly you think, what is going on? And then a couple of hours later, it'll just go away.
Yeah.
And I think it's likely, and I mean, I know Arthur Furstenberg is very strong on this.
Yeah.
That it's, I think it's this beginning to start. And what I can't find is explanations really of how these satellite systems work properly from a telecoms point of view. So what the ground stations look like and how big the footprint is and all that kind of stuff, and what frequencies they're using and stuff. But if anybody knows, I'd gladly receive that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Can I just respond?
Go.
Guy, quickly. That video that I talked about from Claire Edwards right at the beginning. If you Google her name, you'll see some. I was watching it last night. She was talking because she was doing all the editing for the UN, and they talk extensively about these satellites. There are 53,000 of them. And the UN were highly concerned about space debris and soot coming down. And I was like looking at the soot on my car, like, oh, well, there's, yet another factor, there might be some information there, but you're right. That's yet another thing. Sunspots as well, and varies in Schumann resonance as well.
Yes, the Schumann radiation has really changed, hasn't it, over the last few years?
It really changes.
Yes, so it's gone away from the seven or eight cycles up to 13, 14 and so on. But actually, it's very, very, because it's so weak and it's magnetic, we have to measure it magnetically. It's very, very difficult to measure. So it's very specialized equipment. So, not many people know about it.
The Germans, the Bioresonance, that society, I'll see if I can get in touch with them, Catherine, find somebody who knows English.
I'm just looking at the time.
Sorry.
I know, no, it's all good. You can come back on again, Myriam, and then we can ask you a whole load more questions.
It would be a pleasure and an honor.
Because I know that Neil was going to give us an update about the Matt Warman letter, which is exactly the consultation that you were speaking of, Myriam, the one that takes away all the restrictions to planning.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say hi to Philippa, who's going to come on. Philippa, are you okay if we just spend a few minutes talking about the Matt Warman consultation, the planning one, before we go over to you?
Okay.
And can I ask a question before you go off, Myriam, please? It was a very good talk.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to refer, you said the WHO website, on the WHO website, it says they cannot put up a mask if there are people who are sensitive. Could you provide us a reference to that, please?
I will look for it, because it's what I found when I was drafting that letter for our community. So I quoted them. But then you see, here's the thing, is how do they define sensitive? But I will go look for it.
We can work on that later, but that looks a critical link to have.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, good point, Michael. Over to you, Neil. And while Neil's unmuting, I think we're going to have to leave this STOA subject until next week. Karen is she's prepared a letter for STOA. That was the European Parliament presentations, which had inaccurate facts within them. And Karen actually, I've put the link in for the presentations in the mail out. And Karen Churchill is asking if somebody could go through the buttons, which they contain inaccurate information. There's one on conspiracy theorists, which is us both, by the way. There's one on regulation, which is completely inaccurate with regards to ICNUT. So if anyone's got some time and would like to look at those, the mind map, it's the mind map, you'll see it. That would be great. Neil.
Should we stop recording or?
Oh yes, we can stop recording. Yeah, hold on a sec. Thanks, Brianna.